So today for our Crown Forum conversation, I'm really pleased to be in conversation with a brother who I've been in the brotherhood with in terms of being associated with Morehouse College for 30 years now, slightly over 30 years. Sully Welch is my resident assistant when I was in Graves Hall on the second floor, and really, for a high school kid who's coming from Arlington, Texas, translated the experience of going to college, going to Morehouse College specifically, in such an effective way, and one that, in retrospect, you see was filled with accountability, loving kindness, and a firm hand and direction. And so, Sully, I've always and do love you and respect you because of that. And today, what I'm hopeful of is that we're just going to have a conversation that's not based on, our personal relationship and knowing each other for so long, but really is looking at the innovation by which you've stepped into community uplift and accountability there, and then also looking at business in kind of this innovative way. So, Sully Welch, I just want you to, if you don't mind, just telling us a little bit of who you are, and then we're going to get into just a regular conversation, brother.
Cool. Thank you, David, man. This is fantastic. The love is mutual, and the admiration is pretty broad, man. It's been a pleasure just watching all that. Graves Hall,
Right,
proud and few.
right.
Leaders and keepers of the cloth. Man, you guys definitely humble me and make me proud with all the things you guys have done. It's been awesome just keeping in touch with you guys and watching you soar and rise, and that is a personal just pride of mine, that you don't know what kind of impact you're going to have on young minds coming in. And I know the impact that my resident assistants and advisors and just that brotherhood had on me. So yeah, if I have to define me in two words, I'm a fighter and I'm a teacher.
Okay.
Okay, my mother would echo that. I was kind of like that why baby, and I say that and the fighter kind of in the same thing. I was never satisfied with an answer. I always wanted a deeper level answer. So to me, that's that instinct of, wanting to know why, whether it was why things worked, why somebody did something, why a choice was made. That's always been a part of me. The teacher part is I've always enjoyed learning and being a student. And I think out of that became a calling to teach, because I always wanted to share with other people what I learned. And again, as family would joke, I'm going to share it with you whether you want to know it or not. That's a little bit of that drive, a little bit of that pushiness that gives me that edge. And then that combative piece, even not just mentally, but on the physical side, was nurtured pretty early because we grew up around athletics. And that martial art piece, which is the cornerstone of kind of my business ventures that are out there today, not only in the community, but also on the more, I guess, traditional business side, was something I actually, yes, knew I wanted to do very early. But education in our family is a must. It's not negotiable. It's what we call kind of our family requirement.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, for me, I had to figure out how to fit all that in, because the martial art role models that I looked up to, everybody from Bruce Lee to my current teacher who's still around, Mr. Thomas in the Virginia area, to a lot of the other folks I've been able to train with over the years, that wasn't a real common thing. You heard about the stardom, the movie stars, the ring work they did, then they kind of like went into the thing. But to my first teacher's credit, he had a college degree. He was an English major, but he also fought semi-pro and then was in the community doing things to start up a martial arts school. But he was not one of these people who was affiliated with like a larger governing body, and not to get into the politics of martial arts, but in some systems, you very much have like a governing board that says you're doing it this way. And there's some of the more popular systems. So where he had trained in some of those, that was not his setup. His classes were at the local community center. And then as he grew his business model, he opened his own first school. And he still has that one single school. So he was not the franchise guy. So I started seeing that early and was attracted to that, because not only did I love the training, but I loved how plugged into the community we were. We used to do demonstrations and we used to do breakathons. As a matter of fact, I think this past weekend was the 30th breakathon that I think he started doing specifically to target domestic violence and raise money for that and that type of awareness in the community. So all of that stuff, those little things about how you are a part of the community with your passion resonated early with me. And then really phasing back, and bring me back, please, if I go off track, but I mentioned my mom's family a little bit in the Carolinas area. That was a strong, strong pillar for us growing up because we heard about these contributions all the time. Both my paternal and maternal great great grandfathers were business partners in starting what became Black Wall Street in North Carolina, the North Carolina Mutual Insurance and Life Company.
Mm.
And it spawned into Mechanics and Farmers Bank, which they also co started, and other land grant schools along that corridor. One was a physician, Dr. Aaron Moore, who my son is named after, and the other one was John Merrick, who was a self-made kind of barber, bricklayer, former slave. They got together, had this vision for needs in the community that were not being served: banking, burials, insurance, and they put that vision together and ran with it. So we were always around that. You know, the North Carolina Mutual was still doing very well when I was growing up, and you would, anytime we went to North Carolina, because that was my grandmother's grandfather, and my great grandmother, her mother, lived well into her 90s. We got those stories firsthand. They were all still very sharp mentally. And we would hear that stuff and we would see it, and we would always be in the community. I couldn't go to the grocery store without, someone talking to my grandmother, or her introducing us to them. And with the families right there in Durham being very close, it kind of mirrored, what I was always used to growing up in Reston, a very tight knit community, but it was different, in Durham. And so I got those entrepreneurship messages early, but I wasn't a traditional entrepreneur in that I had this business already done. I knew it was going to be related to martial art. I knew I wanted to do that, but then I had to figure out, what that actually meant. Because even though my teacher had a degree, he wasn't teaching us about business. He was teaching us the training.
Let me ask you this, Sully, because I think that's so important. I think, and the reason I say it is because as somebody who's not wasn't a business major, I wasn't into quote unquote business.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I oftentimes think about in terms of a business model and entrepreneurship, at least coming through Morehouse, quite honestly, for good or bad, is I just think about cats who are wearing ties and suits and who are interested in stacking paper.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly that's a component of it, but I really appreciate how it is that you're framing it in terms of entrepreneurship was to provide a service to community. So very
Yes.
much was in lockstep with community needs and or wants. The idea to become, rich off of it. Of course, we don't deny anybody their paper, but that was not the kind of the presenting or animating movement of the entrepreneurship that you were oriented toward. Is that fair to
Not
say?
at all. That's exactly right. As things shifted in our family, and the entrepreneurship piece in terms of the physical bricks and mortar Book Art Limited stores started to change, as bigger competitors came into the market and literally were putting stores and shopping centers where we were to drive us out, these larger commercial ones. Um, our family footprint kind of shifted, and my father actually went into investment banking and did very well on the commission sales side. And so he encouraged that business part. My brother was very deep in the sciences and always loved that. So he didn't get a lot of that pushing to go back into business. He was pretty well focused on what he wanted. I got some of that dialogue, but it was never to the point that, you have to do this. And so what I did early on and kind of getting my head around learning about business was a little bit in a traditional slash non-traditional way, in that I did two summer programs in the same summer as a high school senior. One was called the Lead Program in Business, and it was a program that, if you're not familiar with, was kind of partnered with Ivy League universities, and you would do a month or so in an Ivy League school setting. The particular program I went to was at Wharton, and we lived on Penn's campus in Philly. At that time, we got exposure to executives. We did presentations. We walked in and talked, and we sat in board meetings and we asked questions, and we did a little bit of travel in the Northeast to New York and Philly and down to DC, and we interfaced with other schools that were in that setup. One was at NYU, the other was at trying to think. The other one was I can't even remember. The NYU branch is familiar because one of my high school friends was also in it, and he wound up in NYU, and I wound up at Wharton, which we were a little bit salty about how we
There's
couldn't
one
get the
at
same one.
wasn't there one at University of Maryland College Park?
Yes, yes, yep.
Yep.
Yep. So we hit kind of that circuit and learned about business. The second one was not directed to business at all because always loved art. Always been a drawer, painter. You put something in my hand, I'm doodling. Doesn't matter where I am. And part of me was thinking at Morehouse, I would come in and major in art, possibly, but with some of the coaching from my dad about learn this business side of art. Don't just focus on the fine art piece and understand what that's about. I found myself trying to find a major that connected the two. And you laugh at this because it was not business. It was like, okay, I have an uncle, my dad's youngest brother, who's an industrial designer, phenomenal. And he designs interiors of planes, buses. Industrial design is how people interface with objects. And so I had done some summers hanging out with him in Texas to kind of see some of his projects. He'd done big tour buses and airplanes and worked on some of those with him and was kind of excited about that. But that wasn't a major at Morehouse. What Morehouse had was a dual degree program with Michigan and Georgia Tech. So Tech, which I'm sure they still have today, you could do that 5 years, get a Morehouse major, Tech major, come out and do something in engineering. With Michigan, it was architecture. And it was that same 5-year plan, and then you could go up to Michigan, get your degree there, and come out and do something in architecture. So when I had to claim that major in the beginning, I kind of went with the engineering one first, because in my head I went, okay, I can put business and art together and figure out how to do something there. And then there was a quick pivot from that, because as I started getting deep into it, I love math, but not like that. They started talking 1 + 1 ain't 2 and discrete math. And I think probably when you were still there, Dr. Gore was still there. And I'm going, woo!
Come on, man. 1 + 1 ain't 2. Come on, man. Come on.
I was like, I don't love it like that. So I was a quick pivot. I wound up kind of in the architecture thing, and it started feeling a little bit right. Like, okay, we get to study arches and history and how things are structured and built, and that was intriguing to me. But as things progress and you start to figure out, and I figured out pretty early, getting to your other question, this is not the destination. Getting through this preset, list of classes and you checking off these boxes to get these 2 degrees and then go to this side of things, this is just what the college is set up to give you. And if you follow it, okay. But since I knew in my heart I wasn't feeling any of that, I'm like, why just go through that to follow the profile? Yeah. So I quickly pivoted by the time I was a sophomore and be like, let me just get a major that's going to get me up out of here, learn some things, and go do what I want to do and figure out exactly what that is once I get a little bit more skin in the game, a little bit of, income going, because I still had to figure that out. Yeah.
So then talk to me after Morehouse, after kind of figuring out, okay, these are some summer programs, these are internships, I have this inroads relationship. So after Morehouse, you come into Morehouse with the mindset, with an orientation from and informed by your family and your interest, right?
Right.
You've gone through the classes, but you're one of the people, and I don't mean to sound cliche here, but you're one of the people who also allowed Morehouse to go through you not just go through Morehouse, right?
Absolutely.
So you had some intentionality about it. You're on the other side of your time at Morehouse College. What does that look like? Is graduate school, what happens then? And then what I'm interested in is, how is it that you find a community need being fulfilled through your martial art orientation and framework? And then I want to hear specifically about how it is that you're bringing that to Morehouse's back door.
After making a big career shift, getting out of Charlotte, going into marketing more heavily, which was my undergraduate focus at Morehouse, and moving back to Atlanta, again with an interest in reconnecting more closely to that martial art network I built here, and joined Coca-Cola in a human resources capacity, because that's what I had done in banking. But after about 18 months of that, got the ability to pivot into marketing with Coca-Cola as a consultant, not as a brand manager. And while I was doing that, I went ahead and enrolled in Georgia State's master's program at night and did a concentration in marketing for my master's versus a general MBA. In that time at Georgia State, we had entrepreneurship as an elective, and I voted in my work group to put together a business plan for a martial art business with the attorney that was in my group and the investment banker that was in my group and the other folks that were there. And that was, again, kind of a real benefit of choosing that program over some others. It was an evening MBA. All those people were working. They had experiences I didn't have, but we got to put our think tank together, and we built this plan. And fractions of that plan are what I wound up putting into when I ultimately left corporate altogether. So I finished Georgia State in 2001. That degree at night, I had left Coke right around that time and just finished it on my own. And 3 years later, I was done with the corporate scene, trying to figure out a way to bring this business venture to life and get more involved with what I was passionate about, and also figure out ways to plug it into the smaller business side of things, because I knew I can make a community impact that way versus going after this franchise model where you could open a martial arts school if you got a black belt, get affiliated with a bigger kind of organization, just try to crank out schools.
So,
That wasn't my experience. Didn't know how to tap into it, but it also did not interest me.
so Suli, I want to get specifically to
Hmm.
um, Welch, right? I want to get there,
Yep.
but I also I because you're so specific. It seems like you're so laser focused. Um, how can other people who are not as focused as you are still get out of, I guess, their lived experience, kind of what you have? It's kind of a weird question. Somebody who doesn't have the DNA that you talk about, or who doesn't have the social capital of the family you've come from and things like that. How are they able to be directed enough to be able to say, okay, I'm not going to go this traditional way, I'm going to go this other way? Some people
Hmm.
might lean into faith, right, and say, okay, I know that. Some people might be able to look at this as an example, to an example of another way of going about doing something. What kind of advice would you give to folks, you being a teacher, right, and a
Hmm.
fighter? um what advice would you give to folks who are trying to figure out, like, oh, that sounds interesting, but I'm not sold yet because I still got to pay bills and stuff like that?
Right. Right. There's two things. I look at my job now is basically to help people beat their toughest opponent, and that's themselves. Living their best life daily. If you can help somebody get into that mindset, you'll help them go a long way. And the things that I think help people get into that mindset are encouraging them and teaching them about the power of self reflection. I did a lot of that, asking those why questions, like I talked about me being a why baby. I ask those questions of myself. I'm good at taking a step back and going, why am I doing this right now? And even if I don't have an answer, I have a personal exercise I go through, which is just go 5 whys deep on it. Ask one time, see what you come up with. If you think it's somewhere in the ballpark of answering that first why, ask it another time and keep pushing down. That's probably a model somewhere that I learned along the way, but it works for me. And then when I try to teach people how to do that, I'm usually doing it in a coaching kind of way. You take problems, you get a mentor, you get a circle of like-minded. It may not be specifically in your thing, but like-minded people who are willing to kind of do that mental work. And that can be in your social circle, your work circle, your school circle. But when you kind of dial into that and go, this self-reflection time is going to be useful, and I'm not afraid to ask myself those tough questions or have people ask me those questions, you'll start to formulate better questions, a few answers, but you'll develop kind of that mental stamina to push through things. And that was something that I learned. But when I realized I was doing it, I started seeing the value of that. And so I developed ways to do that for myself. The other part is never being afraid to just work your tail off. A lot of my Morehouse brothers joke me those last 2 years to get out of Morehouse in 4 years before that scholarship ran out.
Right. Yeah.
I took 21 hours and 24 hours back to back. The running joke was cats would see me running across the yard to 8 a.m. classes because I had to pack it in. And the last year, to take that 24 hours, I had to go to Leroy Keith, the president of the college, tell him what I was doing. And he said, I won't even approve this unless you quit 2 of those jobs that you're working on the side. And one of them was connected to that Inroads relationship, and the other one was waiting tables. Because at that point, I'm living off campus. trying to afford that. But I just had like this drive, this work ethic thing that's always kind of been a part of me. But the hard work, it's you got to be willing to do that. Um, and even when it is hard, as we say all the time in our training, we say embrace the suck and just go after it.
Yeah.
You're doing it for a reason. So when you do that, you'll see the results of it. And when it gets really, really crappy, know that you're going toward that thing and just do it anyway. Don't make those excuses that will kind of talk you out of it. Um, you're going to make some mistakes probably because you're working so hard, you get in your own way. But when you make those mistakes, take them as lessons and then pivot them into the next thing. I mean, those are kind of those tips that I would tell somebody who is just struggling with that process of trying to figure it out, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're keen on that self-reflection and knowing that's a valuable tool, you can cultivate that within getting those mentors around you, sometimes traditional, sometimes non-traditional, but being willing to listen and ask those tough questions and give that feedback to yourself and get what's coming in, and then just taking that hard work, nose to the grind kind of mentality and grinding it out, you'll learn some things. Like I said, I didn't have it all scripted. That business plan, graduate school, I've been working 8, 9 years by that point. But it was like something about that grind has always been in me. And when I go for that, nobody's going to get in my way, even if I don't have the answer. Even somebody that's saying, hey, go do that because that'll be easier. Coca-Cola is a good example. I had done well there. But when they have their, if you go back for a graduate degree, you can take it, they'll reimburse you, kind of the tuition reimbursement thing. I did that for the first year. And then as I was still doing well at the company, and I remember those jokes too, people were like, only, you would be in this particular cycle where we were at work. It was pretty tenuous. It was pretty stressful. They were going through one of their first major layoffs in almost 100 years, and we were a part of that. Not getting laid off, but I was part of the team kind of working through that process to have that happen, which was draining. But they were like, yeah, only somebody like you would do that and go to grad school at night. And we know that you're still like off on the side taking these martial art classes. And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I? Because that was just my mindset. But even with that, one of my managers who was close kind of said, there's some more opportunity that's going to come for you because of what you're showing you're capable of. It may net out that you might need to kind of put the graduate thing on hold for a semester or so, and you could always go back. You've got X amount of time to finish it. We still pay you back. And I heard that advice totally differently, David. I was like, here I am on this track doing what I need to do to figure out what I want to do because this ain't it. And here he is going, we'll promote you and you'll get more, income and more status and more clout and just put the grad thing on the side. You can always go back and do that. I'm like, nope. It hit me so much that I resigned and said, yeah, I left a good body of work. I'm going to take these loans on my own. I may have to work a little bit more when I get up out of here. I'll find a way to do it. Got a little bit of help. That's exactly what I did.
So talk to me about, because I want to be respectful of your time here, because I'm going to talk to you for another 2 hours. Because I feel like you're putting a battery in my back. You know what I mean? So in terms of being directed, being self-reflective, and the thing is that kind of knowing the work. I'm not even going to talk about it in terms of a struggle, although I'm sure struggle was there. But the work that you've put in, we've seen you around town, the Welsh martial arts experience. But talk to me about what that is briefly, and then what it is that it's translated into in terms of being a community center, because I really want to end and focus on that and talk about what our responsibilities are to you in kind of how it is that the college is able to be set up to be in community in the way that you've defined yourself as being there, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the soundbite, the Welch martial art experience, was named that and is my experiences in the martial art. And what that means is not just the physical training, but how I was able to cultivate relationships, discover and research how that martial art training is a catalyst, a driver, and an engine all at the same time. It has been for me since early on. It's very diverse. People always ask, I get the question at least a couple times a week, what's your favorite style? And to me, my favorite style is martial art. Yes, I've earned the rank of instructor in almost 6 different systems. Most people don't know that there are 6 different systems. And I've never taken karate. I've never taken judo. I've never taken jujitsu, and I've never taken taekwondo. Those are the big four that people know about.
Mhm.
No slight to any of them, all great systems. What I've learned to do is kind of figure out the things that appeal to me and run with them and try to get into like-minded groups of people that are interested in non-traditional tracks. So when I came to try to create a name for this company, it was about the experience of martial art, not a style.
So let
And
me
that
ask this. Let,
quickly,
let me ask this, and
yeah,
this is going to illustrate my profound ignorance because
it's okay.
but the thing that I think of is, you're talking about many styles and you're really talking about being able to adapt, which is something that I can orient myself toward in being a personality theorist in how it is that we adapt to different experiences. But I also think of Bruce Lee, where he says,
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Absolutely. That was it. I read that book. I read that book in 1985. And by 1989, on a train to Philly with my dad for a business trip, I find myself, bam, there you got it. Nice. And that's the combined edition.
I'm just here, man.
You got to do that.
You were my RA. I'm just saying, I got
You got to do that. You become the cup, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, put that on your head, right? I'm 18 meeting his number one guy. And then for 4 consecutive years, I'm training with that guy 3 times a year, every time he comes to Atlanta. Those things start to permeate.
Right.
So when you get out and you can do your own thing, yeah, it was Welch martial art, singular. I get spelling corrections on that all the time from advertising people. I'm like, no, because what I'm talking about is an art. Mm-hmm. There is no plural. It's an art. It's the art of knowing yourself. So that's what the experience became. A haven for you can come in and train in anything you want. You're not signing up for a system. You're not signing up for a belt. I've been doing this full time now for 17 years. Most people probably in their first 10 years, nowadays probably more like 5 to 6. I won't say what I was going to say, but you get a black belt pretty quick. I bring that up to say I have 0 people that I've promoted to black belt in 17 years. And that's not a goal or a badge of anything. It's to make my point that the people I've attracted and been able to assist and mentor and develop are not chasing a belt. They're chasing a better version of themselves. And to my earlier point, trying to figure out a way to battle that opponent. And so when I figured out there's a market for that, back to the business thing, I doubled down. I created a nonprofit called Balanced Motion, which is about trying to bring that opportunity to youth. Because what I saw going into martial art full time 17 plus years ago was, if you got to go out, you got to have a kids program. You got to keep them on these levels where they're getting recognition and stripes. And, at 5 years in, they have to have that black belt. The parents are going to make them quit. And if they don't get a stripe every 6 weeks, they don't know that they're developing. And I was kind of like, maybe not. Maybe they still want to learn. Maybe they don't want to just be fed. Maybe they don't want to just follow the leader in front of the class and actually figure out what it is that they're doing. Maybe they might have struggled a little bit and hit that wall and want to quit and then figure out how to come back because they realize something else is happening for them beyond kicking and punching, which is never what it's been about for me. Mm-hmm. So Balanced Motion became its own thing. When I created that, I all of a sudden started to get parents, grandparents, businesses who started to see my body of work over time, wanting to invest in that. So now we have grants that fund scholarships for a full year for a kid to be able to train in martial art. And I've targeted it strictly for underprivileged kids whose parents can't afford the franchise school. Back to my parents couldn't afford that franchise school. We went up to the window and looked at all the uniforms and the commercial Taekwondo schools that were out there, and they're phenomenal. They're great. My mom was kind of like, there's this one at the community center. Why don't you take a class with that guy? You can ride your bike there. You can go. You get back home.
Right.
And he and I are still close to this day, and he's still doing that thing. So that's the community piece. And now when you take that and you really double down on it, because when I thought about, okay, I'm going to do martial art in a way that's different, and I didn't have it all scripted out yet, I went, okay, how do I do that? Well, this whole model I've been talking about, these places that I saw, to that first one I'm looking in the window of, were in these strip shopping centers. And they were part of that business hustle. And you had to have so much parking, and you had to be next to this to get foot traffic so parents could do something while, the kids are,
Right.
never sat well with me. And if you only do it in one room, you can only do one thing. What about that community sense of how people see around them, like I saw around me, people doing other stuff that's not what I'm doing? That creates something to aspire to, not a belt.
Mm.
So when I shared this with one of my students, who happens to be a commercial realtor, and I had been in some of those strip shopping centers over the last 15 years, I said, I'm trying to do it different. And what I want is a building where every floor, back to Game of Death, Bruce Lee, every time he went up a floor, he fought a different person in a different system until he got to the montage fighter, which was Kareem. How do I, at 5'4", deal with a 7-footer who's learned all this stuff, and then I got to go in and figure out how to battle and win? Well, you get exposed to different stuff, and we all can learn at that fast rate. But if you're in a community where different things are being taught that aren't the standard thing, you're going to see that. You can't help. It'll rub off on you in the parking lot when you pull in the gate.
Yeah.
So what does he find? But about 10 listings. We narrowed it down to 3. I'm fast forwarding here. By the time we went to the second one, I knew that was it. It happened to be 3 blocks from the back gate of Morehouse. And as many times as I drove by that building while in school and since being back, never noticed it. And then when I was like, oh yeah, I start talking to him about that thing. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah. I go, and then the other part to this is my wife is an entrepreneur now. She came to it much later than me. She's in financial services, and she's phenomenal at what she does. Her moniker is the accountant you can understand, because most people can't understand accountants. And I don't even like accounts. I just love her. The point was, with her paying rent and me kind of like with this other vision, how do we bring everything into one spot and combine our collective passions for helping people do what they need to do to improve their quality of life over time better? That became the Welch Center. It's a center for financial and health wellness. It's an educational center. And now here it is, a 3-story building that happened to be, I pulled this up just for us,
Oh,
a
wow.
rendering of a building. This was the 50th anniversary of the Georgia Teachers and Education Association. It was started in 1918. This book was done in 1966. This building wasn't built yet.
Wow.
It stands today, and it's attached to what was their headquarters in a little house built in 1930 that got a building added onto it in 1970. And now it's all one big thing. But it was currently occupied, abandoned for a while, but occupied by the Tate family. Horacina Tate, Senator Horacina Tate, the Honorable, who's over the West End District, succeeded her father, Horace Tate, who was the executive secretary of the Georgia Teachers and Education Association and first black man to run for mayor of Atlanta in 1967. Did not win. Maynard Jackson, as we know, became the first. But I'm going through this house, and in the attic are like his campaign posters.
Wow.
I didn't pick any of that because of that.
Wow.
Things kind of happen when you're willing to go on that grind and talk to people about that vision. Lo and behold, we're right in the backyard of Morehouse, Spelman, Clark, Atlanta, and Morris Brown. So how do we now create other opportunities for students trying to figure it out to come in and be surrounded by things that are happening new and different? We provide those opportunities. There's accounting majors and business majors at Morehouse who want an internship. Why can't they come see how a small Black-owned business that was started based on a lot of corporate experience that my wife has and has become Welch Financial Advisors and Cecily Welch CPA, and learn how to do that? Why can't those who are majoring in kinesiology at Morehouse, who aspire to train with athletes or go into PE as careers or go into professional sports, come interact with some of the athletes I train using martial art principles, not traditional personal training with weights and machines, at our center? I've done training with Georgia Tech's defensive line for hand skills, how they apply to martial arts, much like my teacher, Danny Nosanto, did, who was Bruce Lee's protege, with the Dallas Cowboys before they became known for that doomsday defense. Mm-hmm. He put hand skills with that from Kali, from Muay Thai, from Wing Chun, these arts that I've studied for a long period. Taking that same template, figured out how we can do that. Shout out to Coach Freeman at Morehouse. Maybe we can make that happen over there for the Tigers. I don't know. But just trying to build those relationships, figure out ways that we can plug into things that are already going on, but push the envelope in terms of thinking a little bit. That's what the Welch Center is designed to do. And Balanced Motion still exists within that structure. The Welch Martial Art Experience still exists within that structure. It's literally a dream come true.
Sully, I want to thank you for the time that you've shared with us. You're such a testament to all the best things, man. I mean, you're just a really good, solid person. And
thank you.
And always have been. And so, to think about this 30 years in, man, it's just a trip that when I was a kid and you were a kid, how much you provided us. I'm not just talking about me, right? Just how much you provided us in terms of being a solid cat who wasn't a square, but who wasn't going to let us, draw too far outside the lines and get ourselves lost. I just thank you for extending yourself to us and for this conversation, man. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. It's fantastic. Anytime I can give back to the students of Morehouse, I mean, it's a calling, but it's also just a tremendous, tremendous joy. And if one little thing that I might share resonates with somebody, great. If it's just a thought starter to know that I'm now, out there and available and always thinking about ways to give back, I know that this platform supports that and many other things. So it's a great opportunity to just take some time today. Yeah.